All right, welcome to another Wannabe Entrepreneur, the podcast about what's really like to bootstrap a company. My name is Tiago, and I bring you an interview today with an indie maker. His name is Taylin Simmonds, and it's a really cool one. Talyn is a successful entrepreneur, indie maker, is the founder of Ghostlii, but we'll be talking more about that during the interview. In this chat, I try to focus more on what happens after reaching product market fit and how the success changes your mentality. So it will be a really interesting conversation. You'll get some really nice, interesting tips on how to reach out to people, how to use social media, LinkedIn to find leads. And as well, you will also hear about more philosophical topics and again, how success changes your mindset and changes your perception of yourself. So, without any further ado, let's start my chat with Talyn. I will just start by asking you to do a quick introduction about yourself, if that's okay, and give a little of context to the listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Taylin Simmonds. I'm the co-founder of Ghostlii, which is a content marketing agency specializing in helping founders and CEOs build personal brands and attract inbound leads through content. We started out just growing people's followings on social media as ghostwriters, but after a while, we started to realize that there's not really a whole lot of value in followers, but there is a large value in brand and audience. And I would differentiate the two by saying followers are just like a vanity metric of people that, like that follow your brand or your accounts on socials, where audience is people that actively engage, they keep you front of mind, they are hopefully within your ICP or like your avatar of who you're actually trying to attract and speak to. And that's where we really turned our focus as a marketing agency, was on audience building to create defensibility against AI, to help founders just have more opportunities, like increase their high value network. So that was my start of how I got into entrepreneurship. And your point on like art, being more of an artist, for a long time I actually had like an imposter syndrome around entrepreneurship, because I'm not one of those guys who just wants to make a bunch of money and like get a Rolex and drive a Lambo, even though I do want to drive a Lambo one day. It's like one of my dreams, just because I have my dream car. So I'm kind of hypocritical. I could never find the strong enough why to just like make lots of money like some other guys could. But I always loved the idea of artistic impact. Like that has always spoke to me. And the more I've gotten into business, I've realized it's not that I'm not an entrepreneur. It's that I just have different reasons and a different why for being an entrepreneur. Like to me, entrepreneurship is an amazing vehicle for impact. It's an amazing vehicle for like creating something incredible and bringing it into the world, whether it's Elon Musk doing Tesla or it's a musician with an album. Like that's where the artistic entrepreneurship comes in. I guess you could say the entrepreneurship is the how to not starve as an artist, and then the artistic side is how to have more impact as an entrepreneur. So they're very closely related.
I always thought that artists and like musicians, etc., they are also entrepreneurs in a way, right? Because I mean, they want to be hopefully their own boss. They want to make money for something they create. They need to learn as well how to sell themselves. So there's a lot of connection. There's probably more connection between a musician and an indie maker or entrepreneur than a musician and someone that works 9 to 5, I would say.
Completely agree. And I used to be an indie musician. I worked at like a record label in my early 20s, building like artistic brands, writing music, figuring out how to market music. And it like if you want to succeed and make money in music or anything to do with art, you do have to understand business and monetization and how to find even product market fit. But you could call it like music market fit. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're completely right.
Which is something maybe I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because even though yes it's somehow similar, and musicians also can be considered entrepreneurs, I feel that musician is or making art is something more spiritual. Trying to sell your music sometimes might mean that you need to figure out what works, and maybe do something that you are not too much into, or do some kind of music that maybe it's not the kind of music you'd like necessarily to make, but it's just what sells, right? How can a musician lead with this, manage their expectations and what they want to make, and at the same time get enough money so that they can live from it?
Yeah, this one can be a little bit tricky because I always say like whenever it comes to like business or art in general, if you just want to like do the thing to do it like for its own sake, then you can do whatever you want. Like if you just want to write music and you don't care about, we'll say, getting the most amount of plays, you don't care about monetization. It's like just write music, have no constraints, do whatever you want, have fun, let it be like an artistic outlet for what you want to create. If you do want to make a living through any type of means, you have to provide value to some type of people who are willing to exchange money like for that value. So
Yeah.
in music, it's like, okay, what's currently big right now? Like you'll notice that the most successful musicians, as much as they might pioneer a new trend, they also tend to be like working within what the collective masses are like wanting to consume
Yeah.
in any type of music. So ideally as an artist, you want to find a way to appeal to like what's currently working without sacrificing too much artistic integrity. So you want to find like a particular niche that's like you can do both. And I think the luckiest musicians in the world are the ones like Flume who can just do whatever the heck they want and they just happen to be very popular
Yeah.
by like people are just into it. Like that's people look at Flume as an inspiration, but if we're honest, he's an example of like a survivorship bias where he's like one in a million where he just did the weirdest stuff and it
Yeah.
happened to just work and everybody loved it. That's pretty rare that that happens, but that would be the
Yeah.
dream as a musician.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it can also be again the same with business, right? Like if you like something very niche and it turns out like everyone needs it, then your business is also somehow in connected to that, right? Because not a lot of people like writing. It's also a very niche thing. A lot of people they prefer like, yeah, I just want to have like an audience, but like writing, constantly having ideas of new topics to share, it's something that a lot of people don't have. You created a business around that, right? So tell me just about the process of like figuring out that you have product market fit in your business.
Yeah, for mine, it wasn't anything too complicated. I just looked at where people were making money and then was like, okay, maybe I can do it better. And you'll hear people like Cody Sanchez talk about this a lot with boring businesses is okay, just find businesses that are like making money, buy them, and then just use modern marketing techniques or modern business and tech and scale them to like higher profits. So that's
Mhm.
always one way you can just get into any business is okay, like what markets are like making money and people are doing quite well? Could I come in and do it either better or different to like capture some of that market? And like even on a big scale, people do that. Look at Instagram launching threads. They're like, oh, you know what, Twitter is like a thing that has this huge evaluation. Why don't we launch threads? Maybe it's
Yeah,
never as popular as Twitter, but it might be worth like $1 or $2 billion, right? So it's
right.
even at like a big scale, you see that done. So if you're a new entrepreneur who's really struggling with finding like a product market fit, I would say the easiest way to get into business is look at something that you're interested in that is already working for other people and making money, and
Mhm.
then just infiltrate that market and do it better.
But I guess it also depends, right? Like the moment you enter in the market, because if you are in a market that is already very saturated,
Mhm.
how can you compete with someone that is already in the market for years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like I think about it in terms of like ghostwriting and stuff. And ghostwriting, I would argue, is becoming a bit more of like a saturated market with more and more people getting into it. So people are like, how can I like stand out? How can I get into it? I just think if you're like rigorously obsessed and have more focus, over like a 12 to 18 month time frame, like you'll annihilate everyone. Like in ghostwriting for particular, or like a marketing agency, if you understand like the platforms and what stuff goes viral, if you understand how to write better hooks and know how to write better copy, if you know what ideas tend to resonate and actually build audiences, if you can have better systems that make it more streamlined for your clients, a lot of these guys that are running businesses that are maybe at like anywhere from $200,000 a year in revenue to like 500,000 to $600,000, like that seems like a lot of money for people that are just getting into business. But it's not
Yeah.
like these guys are like business gurus or operation, like their operations are like super efficient. Like I've noticed that entrepreneurs can kind of half-ass their way to 500,000. Then you could definitely do it better and capture their market share if you just came in with more obsession.
Interesting. Okay. Especially when you're starting as an entrepreneur, it feels like, as you said, like 5K MRR is already something really seems very hard to obtain, you know? But I guess also like a lot of us, like a lot of makers, they don't know much about marketing. So they try to build something they try to share it on social media, it doesn't work, and then they end up, okay, let's put it on the side because they don't want to focus too much on marketing. So in that way, if someone knows about that and likes that, it's definitely an asset. Tell me about, like, you started your company. Can you tell me a little bit more about the growth, the progression? How long did it take for you to get there?
So I got to 10K per month in 30 days. I got to 40K per month in probably like 3 or 4 months. It happened very, very quickly. And I am an
In
anomaly
30
in this
days.
way in some regard. Yeah. But
It's
like when you're doing
crazy.
like ghostwriting and anything that's more like a high ticket service, you got to think that if you can charge 3,000 to 5,000 per client to hit like gross revenue, you only need like 2 or 3 clients. So the real bottleneck for a lot of these entrepreneurs who are starting out who might want to hit numbers like that is lead generation. Like lead generation, I
Yeah.
would say, is a new entrepreneur is like the number one bottleneck that people really struggle with, and they try to solve it through like cold DMs, cold emails, which I would argue is one of the harder ways to get consistent traffic, and it's very low leverage. What I did instead is like I hate doing that stuff and never wanted to do it. I went and built connections with the big ghostwriters who were ahead of me that had too much leads and too much traffic, so they were losing money, and I offered them a percentage of MRR in exchange for leads. And the little caveat here is people hear that and then they go, okay, I just got to reach out to the guys ahead of me and they'll give me leads. It's like, well, no, because they're putting their brand on the line. You have to build a connection with those guys. You have to show your credibility. They have to be willing to vouch for you when they like refer business your way. But that would be one of the only shortcuts. Like I was on a call with an entrepreneur the other day, and I think he's worth like 100 million. And he said, network and relationships is the only shortcut, even greater than money. And I completely agree because with relationships, you can get capital and you can get money. And then
Yeah.
with money, like that's also maybe a shortcut to scale if used correctly and things like that. But network and relationships, like quality relationships, is the ultimate shortcut to anything in life.
Yeah, I mean that's super smart. I've never heard that approach before. But I also know that it's not easy to reach out to someone that is leading in the industry, right? Like, how do you do that? Like, you just try to reach out via like LinkedIn, send a message.
I think maybe like a contrarian approach to what a lot of people do is I call it like non-needy networking. I always want to like build network from a place of like high value. So I will produce like quality content that I think will resonate with these people. And I'll do it for like 3 to 4 months without ever reaching out to these people and be like, okay, once my content is like good enough that maybe they start to take notice, then I'm going to reach out. Like some of the people that I've wanted to network with the most that I was like, I would love to connect with this person. Like they ended up reaching out to me because they seen my content and shouted me out in their newsletters.
Interesting.
I've taken a very like inbound approach where I'm like, what type of content would I have to create to provide enough value and get these people's attention? And the reason I think that approach can be useful, I'm not saying it's the only way, and there are shortcomings to it as well. But where I think it can be useful is if you tell yourself, like, I can't cold DM these guys, like, I need to try to like get notice from them first, and then I can reach out and message them once there's like a bit of rapport through content,
Hmm.
that just like lights a fire under your ass to create higher quality content. Like you can't
Yeah.
use like a DM message in your networking skills as a crutch. You now have to use that as fuel to create better content and do better attraction. And I've found that one of the best ways to create that quality of content is to burn the boats and say like, I have to do this through content.
Hmm.
Otherwise it doesn't work. And that's where you really start to like focus on getting good at content.
Let's say I want to follow that strategy. What do I do? Do I identify 5 to 10 people that I believe can connect me to leads somehow, either by sharing my content or by make a direct connection or just giving me leads? And so, like 5 to 10 people, and then you study their profiles and you try to figure out what kind of content they would be interested in. And then you just figure out which platforms they use the most and then start creating. Is that like more or less the path to apply the technique?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty solid one, going that route. Another thing, too, is like if you just create quality content and can grow on socials quickly, people will take notice. And when I say grow quickly, I mean grow not from cringy content, though, because there is like on any platform, there's like, cat memes for Instagram or there's like Chrome extensions for Twitter. There's always stuff that like can get you to grow quite fast, but you don't garner any brand or respect from like top
Hmm.
creators. I just noticed that any creator who's able to like shake up the space and like grow relatively quickly in a meaningful way with like quality content and unique perspectives, that alone will attract a lot of people because they'll reach out to the people who are on the up and be like, yo, I want to trade with you, or like, yo, like if I'm someone who like takes notice of you now, like that looks good on my brand because you're going to be a big account like later on.
Yeah.
And you really start to see more of that too. So the strategy that you mentioned is like, that's one way to do it. Like a very good way to do it too is like talk about similar stuff from your own perspective, because you know that you're going to be appealing to that person. And
Yeah.
you can also just try to grow really quickly if you understand marketing and the content game well enough, because other people will take notice if you can crack that code.
Yeah. I guess you already knew that before starting your company, right? Because in 1 month to grow to 10K, which is absurd, it's such a great growth. I guess you already had cultivated those relationships, right?
Yes, so 100%. That's true. One thing that I'll say to, because a lot of people are maybe like 18 or they're in high school, they're in their early 20s and they're trying to get these businesses off the ground. Is my business like didn't succeed. I didn't have like a truly like quote unquote successful business, if you want to call it that, until I was 28 years old. Like I failed rigorously in my 20s. Like I worked as a college teacher and I learned a lot of like great skills. I tried podcasting and I failed at that. I did real estate investing and I seen like some successes and some major losses in that. I've done like different jobs, like sales jobs. I've really done a lot of skill acquisition. So when people look at me and they're like, "Oh my God, the growth was like so fast and you built your business so quickly," it's like, well, I also did like a decade of skill stacking and like failures first, and then I happened to finally align myself with the right vehicle that worked with my mindset and the right network, and all the stars kind of aligned. But there's a lot of failures before that. Like I would argue guys that are
Definitely.
like 23 years old and have done it a different way are like they're still ahead of me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, that's so true. When you see someone growing, often you don't see like the time and the efforts and the tears and the sweat that it took for them to get there, right? So they only start popping up in your radar when they're already successful, right? And we assume that it's fast, but quite often it takes years. And a lot of people that I've interviewed in the podcast, you can see that they failed a lot, even when they say they didn't, or just say, yeah, I didn't, that project didn't count, whatever. Like it counted. They learned something from podcasts, whatever, like building a website, trying to figure out a bunch of things. So definitely. You reach that first growth, your first successful business then is Ghostlii your first
Yeah.
really successful business?
Yeah. Like I've seen some decent success in real estate, but I wouldn't consider myself like a great like real estate entrepreneur. But I'd say Ghostlii is the first one where I felt like, we actually achieved something meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Is it fully bootstrapped or did you get like some money? Did you have to raise it or?
It's bootstrapped. Yeah.
Fully bootstrapped. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. I love bootstrap businesses. Like a lot of things in the podcast are about that. And now what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, the first part, like the grinding and the roller coaster and trying to gather the skills and understanding of business to somehow get a paycheck. It's very interesting, tough journey. And what I reckon now is that once you get that paycheck, the journey completely changes. And my first question is, what was the first thing that you noticed that changed in your mindset, in your mental health, once you reached that 10K and then you saw that, okay, it's growing, this is a business? Do you remember something that actually changed in the way of you like seeing life and living life?
Yeah. Identity usually lags reality by quite a few months. For me, I actually don't find it did a whole lot of good in the beginning. If anything, it just made me more anxious and stressed, and that there's a lot more pressure. Like when you're used to failing, like imagine you fail for a decade, right? It becomes very hard to not attach that failure to your identity. You're like, I start a business and I fail, and you start to like predict your own failure, and then you finally have something work. You kind of like psychologically don't really know what to do with that. You're like, wait, but
Yeah.
like I'm the person who always fails, but like now I'm succeeding. So am I the person who can succeed? And like, what about sustained success? Like maybe, I think that I'm a failure or a success, sorry, for the next 3 months, but then my whole business is going to fail and I'm going to lose all my leads. So like, wait, now can I sustain success? Can I continue to scale? Like 10K was one thing,
Yeah.
but like, can I scale? And then your skills and your way of like living in the world and being starts to be tested. It's like, oh, well, now I'm at 40K, but I don't have the consistency and the habits to like maintain this without breaking my mental health. So now you're like tested to not only scale your business, but to become someone new. And that rubs your identity even more. And you're like, well, no, I'm not the guy who works like 10 hours a day. I'm not the guy who is like really on top of things, or like, I'm not like a manager. I'm not a CEO. And like your
Yeah,
identity gets challenged a lot. And I
definitely.
found it wasn't until I was in, like, I think Ghostlii's been around now for about 12 months. We just hit our like
Hmm.
1 year anniversary a little while ago. It wasn't until running it for a year that my identity started to catch up. And I started to
Interesting.
be like, oh no, like I am a different person now. My lifestyle is
Yeah.
different. Like I'm now hanging out. Like I just went to Miami the other week with my co-founder and Dakota, and we met up with some entrepreneurs who run like $10 million businesses,
Wow.
and like met up with this guy who worked with Tony Robbins for like 5 years,
Hmm.
and we're like hanging out with them like it's just normal, and they're coming to us and we're like chatting content. And like I never used to do that before I ran this
Yeah.
Ghostly like agency.
Yeah.
Like that would have seemed like so something else. And then I went to the Bahamas, and now I'm like living in Panama. And after a while, there's just so much evidence that your mind can't like say that it's not real anymore. I'm like, okay, I have a year's worth of evidence that like this is my new life. Even if it was to all fail and I lost everything, I have the skills and the network to build it all back up in
Yeah.
3 to 6 months. Like this is just my new life now. But it let's just say it was like a whole year of like struggle, personal identity
Interesting.
change, imposter syndrome, fear of failure, fear of like not being able to sustain success, fear of my competitors outpacing me. Like
Wow.
it was more
Yeah,
of a
I'm going
struggle for
through all
me
of
than
that. It's
positive.
so interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting how money can validate a person, right? Because what I feel was, so with my project Pod Squeeze, again, also like I've been doing this for like 10 more than 10 years, trying a bunch of projects, didn't work. And then but I've been learning, right? I've been learning, and I feel like, especially with the podcast, interviewing a bunch of people, I feel that I've been learning more and more about entrepreneurship. And when I compare myself with someone that is just beginning, as I used to think, okay, I know what they are doing wrong, but how can I prove it? Because I'm not successful. In terms of money, like don't have any successful business. But then you get one that actually works in 1 month or 2 3 months, it changes everything. And suddenly people look at, then you start sharing your revenue. Like if you do this build in public on Twitter, etc., people start validating you, like, wait, this person like actually knows what he's doing. But like in your mind, nothing changed. Like it's just a couple of months. So I totally understand that. Like suddenly you're thinking, no, not used to be a failure, but I never succeeded. Nothing changed. But now suddenly everyone expects me to get this company to keep growing, and that's hard to manage. What you said, that a while for you to do so, mainly because it also takes a while, I guess, for your brain to get used to that. Is there any other techniques or some reading or something that changed your mind? Like how did your mind gradually change towards accepting that now you have a successful business?
Anytime you're going through a transformation, whether it be personal or like business related or identity related, it just takes time for you to stack so much evidence against the contrary belief that you're holding. So for me, like after a year of running a business, like working as a full-time entrepreneur, meeting these people, like eventually you're just like, oh yeah, like I am this person. The only shortcut I found, which this probably is what helped me, because it's not a coincidence that I started to feel more into this new identity after I did this, was I did ayahuasca in the Costa Rican jungle for 3 days, and then I did MDMA therapy as well. And I found those two things, although like psychedelics and drugs get like a bad rap, I found using them
Mhm.
with an intentional purpose for personal transformation and identity change to be extremely useful. And that I think that fast
That's
tracked me by
interesting.
probably like quite
Yeah.
a few months or a year. The ayahuasca, especially, I think fast tracked my identity change. But I would say, like, without psychedelics, I don't want to say, like, oh, yeah, just go do psychedelics to overcome your imposter syndrome and your anxiety. That's not what I'm saying. But you can do it if you're willing to open your mind to a new way of being, is maybe the right word. Like your thoughts are going to change, your actions are going to change, and it's going to feel uncomfortable at first, but just like continue to lean into these new habits and be
Yeah.
uncomfortable, it will eventually shift.
Can you tell me how the ayahuasca experience shaped your mind?
Yeah, so ayahuasca is
It's like mushrooms, right? It's psychedelic, is somehow similar to mushrooms, or this kind of experience, no?
I thought it made mushrooms look kind of like child's play. Like Aya is like one of the most intense psychedelics you could do like
Okay.
in the world. It's pretty hardcore. But I don't want to say that to like scare people either. It just is like a very intense type of drug. or medicine, as they call it. What I would say, this is with any psychedelic, like ayahuasca or anything, if you look at it from an intentional therapeutic use is, so let's
Mm-hmm.
imagine that you're going through your life and you've never really questioned anything. You have like these certain habits that your parents passed on to you, certain thoughts that you've always believed. And as Joe Dispenza says, like predictable past, predictable future. Like if you're doing what you've always done, you're just going to continue to get what you always got. So you're stuck in like a habit and thought pattern heading in one direction, right?
Right.
You do a psychedelic like ayahuasca or even like MDMA therapy or something, and your thoughts and your state of being are like forced to be different. Like for the first time, maybe in your life, a medicine is
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, whoa, you're going to think something you never knew was possible. You're going to do
Yeah.
something and be a person that you never knew was possible. And now you
So
have that
interesting.
frame of reference in your mind. Like it's almost like a door opened. After the second night, especially, I had never felt more confident, assured of myself, purpose driven, and motivated in my life. Like I felt like solid like a rock. Like no one could have rocked my confidence like in that state. And
Interesting.
even though when I came back, regular life kind of kicked me out of that state, but the difference is now I remember what it was like to feel that way. I remember what I thought. I remember how I felt. I remember how I moved through the world when I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that. And I can go back there. It's just that now I have to do the work to make that my default state. So, like, how do I think those thoughts more often? How do I live? What kind of habits do I need to feel that way without the medicine? And so I like the analogy that some therapists use with psychedelic medicine. They say it opens the door, but it doesn't walk through the door for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, once that door is open, it's like, you've kind of like walked through it and then you've come back
Yeah.
and you can just walk
Yeah.
through it
Yeah.
again. So it
Interesting.
kicks you out of all those patterns.
Yeah.
Shows you that you can be someone new. It breaks your limiting beliefs. Like it just cracks it wide open. And that's how I
Mm-hmm.
found it was really useful, was just to be like, okay, you could be this person now. Just that's your choice. Go be that person. You know how to do it now.
So it helped you somehow to kick out the imposter syndrome in
Yeah.
a bit, or do you still have it a bit?
I think you always have it. Like, here's to be a myth of imposter syndrome is people are just like, oh yeah, one day your imposter syndrome is going to go away. It's like, no, the reason that you're feeling the imposter syndrome, you can overcome that. So let's say I build a $500,000 company, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not the person who could build this company, and I have imposter syndrome. But then I get used to being like, oh no, this is normal for me now. But what
Yeah.
about when I build a $3 million company? What about when I all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I want to incorporate video, and I'm like, well, I'm not really good on camera. You're just going to always have imposter syndrome when you try something new. So I think it's less about like overcoming it in one particular domain. It's more about just knowing that whenever you're going to do something new, you're
You'll
never
have
going to
it.
feel ready or qualified to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you just
Yeah.
need to fail forward. And I don't even like the word failure anymore, to be honest. I prefer just like test and iterate, because that's all that it really
Mm-hmm.
is. Like even
Yeah.
content, you could say like I posted a piece of content and it failed. It's like, or you could say, hey, I'm trying to have more hits per month than misses. So
Yeah.
inevitably I have to test stuff and then iterate on my tests. I have to know what works and what
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. Like I think test and iterate is better than failure. And if you just do that forward, like you'll always encounter imposter syndrome, but it just won't hold
Yeah.
you back.
That's really what also like moves or brings success in life, isn't it? I feel that in entrepreneurship, but I guess in everything, the relationships and everything in life. But if you think about entrepreneurship, a lot of like people that succeed in entrepreneurship is when they do this 12 on 12, so 12 months, 12 startups. And like Peter Levels did that. And a lot of people did this. That what the only thing that makes you like puts you in this mindset of it's okay to like stop something or to fail and start something new. Eventually you learn from things that did not work, you apply it, reapply, and suddenly you'll find success. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, I'm convinced that's one of the best ways to find the success, is to just be okay with the quote unquote failure, which I like when you said it, it's not failure, but we are taught that yeah, failure is, it's a bad thing, that we should always insist even when thinking is not, stuff is not working out. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why a lot of people fail to break through the first part of entrepreneurship. It's because they're like, no, I want to insist, like, this is bringing a little bit of money, so it might one day bring a lot of money, so I'll just keep on pushing and pushing. But pushing without adapting, just pushing and doing the same thing, will get you nowhere, right?
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, if you really think about failure, and you just like actually gave me these thoughts, I never thought about this before. Was, like there's failure from like the tribe or like other people. It's like their perception of you is failure, and if
Yeah.
that affects your mental health, and like you hold on to that, you give it too much value and too much clarity, it might like affect how you feel, it might affect your performance. But then there's also the idea of like you seeing yourself as a failure, and if you just expand your time horizons, like it goes away. Like Hormozy says that all the time, but it's so true. Like you could call that perspective. If I look at myself on like a day-to-day basis, like I have to have a piece of content win and go viral every day or I'm a failure. It's like, okay, that's like a pretty rigorous like measuring
Yeah.
stick, and I'm probably going to see
Mhm.
myself as a failure. But if I expand my time horizon and say I just need to have content that is consistently hitting every week and every month, so I'm building a brand up in the right direction, because it's impossible for me to hit with every piece of content. I no longer see that not going viral every day as a failure, but I see it as a test to learn more and to grow. Like
Mhm.
it just doesn't affect your mental health. Like you don't attach it to your identity. Like never say like I am a failure, because that's one of like the worst things you could do
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
like your
Yeah. Yeah.
internal dialogue and how you talk to yourself. Like that'll just ruin anybody.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mindset shift one has to make to become like their own boss, because you need to figure out all of these tricks and you figure out a lot about yourself as well. One thing that I'm also interested to figure out is how do like indie companies work, because we know a lot about VC backed companies. I mean, there's movies about it, there's like tons of material, books and podcasts and everything, and those are like today's superstars, like Elon Musk, Zuckerberg's, what now they want to fight, woo, amazing. So like those are the people that, me being a person that loves business and entrepreneurship, I grew up admiring that and thinking, okay, that's the only way. But I never really connected with that. And then I found about bootstrapping, indie hacking, and I love this because it gives you much more freedom. As I'm going and as I'm finding some success with my company as well, I'm trying to figure out like what next, right? Because I've reached this, I'm able to pay my bills, but now do I want to just like crush everyone? Do I want to just make more and more money? What should I prioritize now? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, what are your goals and what do you prioritize the most with Ghostlii?
So what are my goals? I heard this again from another entrepreneur that I wrote for him. I was very lucky. I got to get consulting from him. I think he ran like $100 million marketing agency. And he said, some businesses are just stepping stones. Like that's all they are. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
because everyone thinks like, oh, I need to be like Tesla. I need to scale this up over like 10 to 20 years and become this like big. No, you don't. It's like, for me, like my marketing agency is not something that I'm going to scale to like a global insane product. It's a stepping stone
Okay.
business. I'm learning marketing. I'm learning operations. I'm learning scale, expanding my network, doing service-based business where it's like done for you. So like I'm doing this like for the client, and that's the model that I'm learning, and it's taught me a lot of skills. It's helped me escape, well, quote unquote, the first level of the matrix, because I have
Mm-hmm.
some level of location and financial freedom with my earning potential, and I don't have an earning cap, because the more clients I bring on, the more scale I do, the more money I can make, which is incredible. So it's a great self-improvement vehicle in that way. But do I think it's like the really big end goal business that I want to scale? Like, no. Like, as someone who was a university or a college teacher for like 5 or 6 years, I really love education and synthesizing knowledge and learning. Like, if I was honest with myself about where my true passion lies, it's in educating people, consuming knowledge, but finding better ways for people to remember it easier, finding different analogies that make it easier to understand, synthesizing it into with like other knowledge in ways that is more useful than it is on its own. Like those types of businesses, like e-learning businesses, are something I'm very passionate about right now, and decentralized education. I feel like an emotional pull, a positive emotional pull in that direction with passion. I really want to move into that and even become more of a creator, or maybe like more intention and more effort on the creator side of my business,
Mm-hmm.
where can I create better content? Can I write better hooks? Can I be putting in maybe 10, 20% more effort to creating better content in general and really stand out as a creator? Because that's a tough thing to do. Like a creator, capturing attention, holding attention is very hard. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
meaningful challenge that I could build a business around. From there, I don't know. Like I'm open to it changing as I get more inputs, more information. I meet new people, new doors open. I walk down these paths. Maybe I fail, maybe I don't. Like, just test different things and see what happens. But the number one thing I would say for any entrepreneur, like if they're in a similar boat to myself and they're trying to figure out what to do, is like without clarity, you just like can't move. Like you need clarity on a direction. And if you don't have it, be willing just to like iterate and test and see. Like in your case, it's like, yeah, okay, you could scale your business. Like, do you have any emotional pull to do that, whether positive or negative? Doesn't really matter which one. People want the passion, but you don't need the passion. It's like if you're just like, oh, I need to crush my competitors, like I'm pissed that they're ahead of me, or you're like, I need to make like 3 million a year, like I'm pissed I don't have it. Like if you have that fuel, then scale it. But also be aware that maybe it's not the most useful vehicle to scale. Maybe there's higher leverage, like other businesses that would scale faster, that you have opportunities to scale with other partners. Like I don't know, it's so unique to the individual, but you need clarity around what you want to do and where you want to go.
Right. I guess sometimes you don't know if your drive comes from yourself or from what you see outside, right? Because it's a very competitive entrepreneurship, and economy is very competitive. The goal is always like get more and more and more and more. And that's like how a lot of the companies, most companies work really. Just like keep growing, keep growing. If you, as a CEO, show the projections, you'll be like, yeah, you will be the same, and maybe even go a little bit down. Everyone like, hey, fire the CEO. All right. So the idea is always keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. And I think it's natural that a lot of us think, okay, now I just need to keep growing. But maybe that's not what I personally want, right? But it's interesting, like how to distinguish what you want and what you are made to believe that you want, right?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, and I would say it comes from like actually experiencing things. Like Mark Manson has this quote where he says you have to try on different beliefs. For me, like I thought I was going to scale Ghostlii to a $1 to $3 million company, and we scaled it up to 70K per month, and I hated it. I was just like,
Okay.
our systems of scale are breaking. The amount of clients that we have, the amount of management, like my co-founder and I agreed we were not enjoying the business anymore, and we did
Interesting.
not have enough of a negative emotional drive to want to do better in that particular vehicle of business. So we took it as far as we went until we're like, this is not for us. Like, which is very different than sitting there and saying, oh yeah, like we could, I don't know, maybe we'll scale this thing to 1 million, maybe we'll scale it to 3, like we'll see. It's like, why don't you just like try doing it, see
Yeah.
how far you get, and see if you get, if you feel like you've gone too far. Because after we did that, we backed our scale off to around like 40K per month, and then to redo our systems, we backed it off even further, and now we're
Yeah.
thinking about scaling again, but keeping it at a consistent like 50K per month, because we're like, we can manage that. It's healthy, good cash flow. We can then use that cash flow to fund other businesses that have higher points of leverage, are more of done with you models instead of done for you. So we have a different customer experience, a different expectation from the customer altogether. And we're more passionate about that. But the only reason we have that clarity is because we actually did it. Like so many people are like stuck
Good
in
point.
thoughts. They're like, should I do this? Should I do that? It's like, it is better for you just to do something than to sit around all day thinking about what you
Yeah.
should do. Like
Yeah.
people are so worried about going in the wrong direction and realizing that it like wasn't what they wanted to do, because then they feel like it was a waste of time. Gaining clarity is never a waste of time. Never. Just move. Just do something.
How did it feel to, scale to 70K and then reduce that, making less money? Because I feel that like you want to drive your Lambo, right? So it doesn't, like, don't you feel like, ah, man, but now I'm making less money? How do you deal with that?
Well, again, it's time horizons, right? So if you look at it on like a month to month basis, yeah, you might be like, well, crap, like I was so close to the Lambo and all this stuff. But I I have this thought that like beliefs like come in pairs because they constrain. So, for example, if I'm like, hey, I really want to get a $3 million per year business, if that was the only like criteria, then I
Yeah.
would have just scaled Ghostlii and like bit the bullet. But I'm like, okay, I want to get 3 million per year, but I want to have more leverage. And service-based businesses only had leverage if I could delegate better, and I didn't like that form of leverage, which was what would be called team or cooperation leverage. I want more code-based leverage through content. So then I have to change the model. So the second I wanted more leverage, I'm like, this might get me to 3 million if I scale, but it doesn't give me the leverage piece. I don't get the lifestyle piece that I want, where I have less headaches, less client
Right.
problems.
Leverage means to have more freedom, more control over your life. Is that it?
leverage means having asymmetric outputs to your inputs. So,
Right.
for example, if you go work at like McDonald's and you work like 8 hours and you get 8 hours of pay, you have no leverage.
Mhm.
If you were to create a product, like let's say like a digital product that you could sell like a course, and you create it once, but it can be sold infinitely for like the next 5 years. Now
Yeah.
you've like spent the time to make the product once, but the output continues to compound and grow. And service-based industries for me, the only point of leverage is that I can hire people to do the work for me, but then I
Yeah.
still have to manage the people. And if those people quit, who has to come in and do the work? I do. So then
Got it.
it's a
Got it.
very
Yeah.
it's also like a risk profile
Yeah.
assessment. It's like, hey, in the service-based business, I'm accumulating more risk as I scale to 3 million, where if I change the vehicle altogether to e-learning, I can scale to 3 million with less risk and more leverage. And that's when I was like, okay, let's expand the time horizon to 3 years. Maybe I don't make 3 million this year, but if I make it in 3 years at higher leverage, I win. And that was
Right.
where I was like, it didn't bother me at all to take the pay cut because I'm still fine.
Yeah, because the goal is not only money, right? Is money plus lifestyle or plus this
Yes.
leverage. And that's what I've been seeing as well. When I just had a nice chat as well with Tony Dean, and he basically told me the same. So he wants to beat the other competitors, he wants to grow, but he also wants to keep his like lifestyle and his time and the freedom.
Dude, for sure. You got to know how you're built. Like, there's people and entrepreneurs I know that are so driven to annihilate the competition and be like a conqueror, like a modern day conqueror,
Yeah,
where they're
yeah.
like, I built this incredibly big business. I dominate the competition. I wear my suits. I drive nice cars. And they're like, I am someone who is significant and important in society because I'm a conqueror. And like, power to them. I just think there's less of those people than people think. I think a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs are like, hey, we want to have like some level of freedom. We want to make good money. We want to be able to like live life a little bit more on our terms. We want to spend more time with our family. We want to create more
Yeah.
opportunity for them. We want to travel the world more. We want to have like maybe more safety and security with our investments in the future. Like, your why can be whatever in alignment with you. It could even be impact. It could be, I've heard other entrepreneurs say, once I made 30,000 per month, business just became the measuring stick for self improvement. That's great. I think that's a great reason to scale a business. Is like, you need to be growing somewhere. There's that whole thing, if you're not growing, you're dying. And you said
Yeah.
something about how businesses always need to be growing. I would
Yeah.
argue that businesses don't always need to be growing, but a person always has to be growing in a specific domain. And some people just choose to do it in business for their entire life. Other people will do business for 10 years and then they'll go and become as jacked as humanly possible and they'll push their
That's very
fitness.
interesting.
You have to just be growing somewhere, and business is just one
That's why
vehicle to
Elon
grow.
Musk wants to fight Zuckerberg now, maybe somehow, you wanna
Yeah,
grow in the
exactly.
physical way. Yeah, I was like, someone just shared a tweet from Peter Levels with me, where someone asked, like, dude, you're making already 2 million ARR. Like, why keep building products? And he says, like, it's not about the money, it's exactly about the growth. I don't want to stop using my brain because if I do, it's like a muscle and I won't keep exercising it. Recently, Coldplay. So I'm based in Portugal, and Coldplay came here, and like, it was nuts. People like, yeah, Coldplay, it's amazing, and I went to the concert. It was a good gig, but then I was thinking, man, they have so much money. Why do they keep doing this? It's definitely not for the money, but I guess now I realize is because what you just said. People just want to keep growing as a person. They want to keep working their brains out. So that's very interesting point.
I could try framing it this way. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you don't have a lot of money, a lot of the biggest problems in your life stem from money. And because the biggest problems stem from money, a lot of your negative emotion comes from a lack of money, right? A lot of your like
Mm-hmm.
lack of self-worth, a lack of confidence, maybe you're struggling to like put food on the table. Maybe your friends make more and they're going on incredible trips and you can't afford to go and you feel this FOMO.
Right.
You want to live in like a nicer place and not live with roommates, but you don't make the money. Like, all of these things like affect your identity and your mental health, and they're big problems. What people don't realize when they don't have money versus the people that have it is, after a while, the money stops solving these problems and you end up with
Right.
different problems. So you eliminate all those, and like, humans we just evolved to always need a problem to solve. Like, otherwise we would have
Yeah.
just died, right? It's part of our evolution. It's part of human nature. So when your problems no longer come from money, the next problem you have is like fulfillment. Am I enjoying life? Do I enjoy like being around myself? do I enjoy like what I'm doing day to day? And like then you have a different problem. And sometimes those problems are solved by just pushing yourself more and more in business because you need something to do. Like, dude, I sometimes think about this where if I don't want to work, sometimes I'm like, what the hell am I going to do if I don't work?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to watch Netflix? Like, okay, well, I'm not
Yeah,
going to feel good
exactly.
about myself if I watch Netflix. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to play video games. Like, well, no, that's not moving my life forward. I'm not growing. Am I going to sit here and read? It's like, okay, well, reading is great. I enjoy reading, but too much of it is just a form of procrastination. Like, at some point, I'm like, I just need something meaningful to do, and business happens to be one of those things. So, like,
Yeah.
why not just do that? And then
It's a
that becomes a
passion.
habit. And once it's a
Yeah.
habit, you can't turn it off. Yeah, it's passion
Hmm.
as well, 100%.
Yeah. We don't do this because we have to, right? We do it because we like to do it. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think that's also a great point to finish our conversation. Thank you so much, Talyn, for chatting here with the wannabe entrepreneurs.
Yeah, man. No, of course, it's been fun.
Thank you very much. And this is the end of another wannabe entrepreneur interview. If you liked it, make sure to share it with all of your indie hacker friends. If you have suggestions or want to send me a message, do so at WBTiago on Twitter. And if you want to support this podcast, we don't do any sponsorships, so you can join our community for indie makers. It costs $10 per month, but you will be able to meet makers from all around the world. So if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling that being a solo founder is getting a bit tough, join us and you'll feel much, much better. This was another wannabe entrepreneur. See you next time.